Gaming can be a lot of fun. There are many different game franchises you can pick from, but whenever a franchise exists for long enough, it's inevitable that a dud gets released. These games can be referred to as a black sheep. Oxford defines a black sheep as, quote, a member of a family or group who is regarded as a disgrace to it, end quote. So let me make this clear. Being a black sheep does not mean it's a bad game. Take The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, for example. In 2000, a tech demo was made for what the GameCube could do graphically, and it showed Zelda fighting Ganon. This set an expectation for what the next Zelda game would be, and when The Wind Waker came out, people didn't like it because they expected this. But as time went on, people started saying it was great, and it even got an HD port. It was considered a black sheep for a time, but then the perception changed as time went on. Another question we can ask is, does a game being different make it a black sheep? No, obviously not. Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance is nothing like the other games in the Metal Gear franchise, but it's not trying to be a Metal Gear game.
Nice argument, Senator. Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
If it had Snake running around slashing giant robots, it wouldn't feel right. But it uses a different protagonist, and it's not trying to be a stealth espionage game. It has its own identity in the Metal Gear series, and it's actually good. Brutally difficult, but really good. Just because a game franchise deviates from the norm does not inherently mean the game is bad. Sometimes the general public likes a game, whereas the company or publisher doesn't like it. God Hand is a really fun game. I love it so much. The combat is great, the campy attitude is hilarious, and I am now a hardcore gambling addict. Just about everyone who has played God Hand says it's great, but Capcom doesn't seem to like it. It's not on Steam or any other online store, and it hasn't gotten any kind of remaster or remake. Capcom makes remasters and re-releases all the time, but it's almost like they're ashamed of God Hand. It sucks, but as long as Capcom views it as a black sheep in their library, the only way we can experience the joy of winning a hand of blackjack or seeing Lucky Clover cross the finish line is by other means. Now, with all that being said, sometimes a game is the black sheep of a franchise and it completely deserves that title. As a quick honorable mention, I was thinking about adding Mario Sunshine to this video, but I don't really think it's a black sheep. From what I've heard, it's the weakest 3D Mario game, and it has one of the highest learning curves, and I suck at it. But a game being a 7 out of 10 in a series that's typically 8, 9, or 10 out of 10 should at least be brought up. But overall, Mario Sunshine, it's a-okay.
The truth is obvious. The guilty party sits alone. It is none other than Mario.
Objection! Overruled. I judge the
Bearer of the curse, seek souls. Larger and more powerful souls. Seek the truth. That is the only way. Lest this land swallow you whole, as it has so many others. Oh, you're wondering where the Emerald Herald went. Last I heard, she took a trip down to the gutter. The stupid bitch has no idea what horrors lie down in that festering pit. But I'm sure she'll be back soon.
Let's start off with something pretty easy. From the get-go, let me say I am a FromSoft simp. I love Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 3, Armored Core 6, and Elden Ring. So far, the only game of their modern library I have not tried out is Sekiro, but that's besides the point. Now, some of you might have realized I skipped over Dark Souls 2. DS2 is the most polarizing game in FromSoft's library, and that's for a good reason. Depending on who you ask, it's either the most underrated gem you'll ever have the privilege of experiencing, or it's an abomination to Miyazaki himself. Now, Dark Souls 2 has over a dozen different video essays discussing this, and now I can throw my hat in the ring. I do not enjoy Dark Souls 2 as much as I've enjoyed other FromSoft games. We all know the drill. Adaptability, no iframes on opening doors, BS tracking overhead slam attacks, life gems, your health getting cut down after dying, the elevator that goes up into a lava castle. Yeah, you don't need me to regurgitate these points. We've all heard these points a dozen times already. But some people do enjoy Dark Souls 2 a lot. But for every guy who likes it, there's another guy who doesn't. When it comes to all of FromSoft's other games, we're all on the same page for the most part. Dark Souls 1 is so close to being a perfect game up until after you beat the Londo Bros and have to suffer through the rushed second half of the game. Dark Souls 3 is a well-polished gem and it's a lot of fun. Armored Core 6 is a banger of a game, and by the way, I beat pre-patch Balteus, so I'm kind of a, god gamer. And Elden Ring, I mean, come on, it's fantastic. Obviously, there will be people who disagree, but overall, most people will say that these games are good, great even. But Dark Souls 2 is a toss-up. Some people will say that playing the base game is the best way to experience it, while some say Scholar of the First Sin is the best way. Some say all versions suck, and I say it's whatever. Dark Souls 2 is the only modern FromSoft game that I have tried and could not bring myself to finish it. I just did not enjoy it. That being said, Dark Souls 2 requires the most patience in the Dark Souls series, and that's not always a bad thing, right? Like me and my ugga mugga big sword go big bird brain, it's just not made for Dark Souls 2. Some people do prefer the slower paced combat, and let's not ignore the other good things the game actually did. It established the 4 ring slots that we currently have, and made dual wielding a game mechanic. Even if it was a bit bare bones, they still put it in. And alongside that, it has some banger lines that are just so good.
Life is brilliant, beautiful. It enchants us, to the point of obsession. Some are true to their purpose, though they are but shells, flesh, and mind. One man lost his own body, but lingered on, as a head. Others chase the charm of love, however elusive. What is it that drives you? Once, the Lord of Light banished dark, and all that stemmed from humanity, and men assumed a fleeting form. These are the roots of our world. Men are props on the stage of life, and no matter how tender, how exquisite, a lie will remain a lie. Young Hollow, knowing this, do you still desire peace?
Okay, you know what? No, fuck this. It has good and bad qualities. Nice guy beta take. There was one zone in this game that damn near broke me, and that's because it embodies some of the worst parts of this game. You might assume I'm talking about the Shrine of Amana, but no, it's the Dragon Shrine. This zone is probably one of the most poorly thought out sections of Dark Souls 2. Almost every zone in a Souls game has a set-in-stone way of beating it because the developers try to predict how the player will respond to said zone. Some zones are made with the intention of just running through it, while others expect you to take out most, if not all, of the enemies. Let's quickly look at Dark Souls 1. Lost Izalith is meant to just be ran through like a college thought. When you learn the best way to get to the boss, you can just easily run past everything. The Undead Parish is built to make the player fight a few groups of enemies in a row, but they're spaced out enough to give the player some breathing room after each little 3-man fight. The developers gave these areas an intended way of getting through them, but this way of thinking does not apply to the Dragon Shrine. First off, there's only one way to get to the boss. No side routes, no shortcuts, nothing. Just a simple point A to point B. You just run up some staircases. Okay, sure, fine, easy. So your first thought might be, hey, I'll fight every enemy I come across, but this area just so happens to have one of the worst enemies in the game. These giant hammer-swinging assholes are a pain in the ass to beat. They basically have infinite stamina, they can keep a combo going on forever basically, and unless you're playing a based strength build, you're probably not killing them all that fast. So if killing the enemies is a pain, why not just sprint past them all? Don't care about it. Well, they're placed in such a way to make running past them as annoying as possible. Keep in mind, Dark Souls 2 does not immediately give you invincibility frames when opening a door, so you need to either bait these two guys away from the door or kill them both. But killing them both is horrible because they both aggro onto you at the same time. Also keep in mind, there's a priest on a spire a little bit back that'll be shooting spells at you if you didn't already go out of your way to kill him as well. But what about after this door? I'm sure it's not all that bad. Well, you have to run up this godforsaken staircase. These two knights aggro together again, so killing them is a pain. Then you have these two smaller knights, which, guess what? You can aggro them separately, so they're not all that much of an issue. But if you kill them all, guess what? Now you have to deal with another set of knights, and you'd expect that you could fight them one at a time because of how far away they're spaced out. But guess what? No, you can't. They aggro together. And aggro both of them! Why? Why? So look, what I'm getting at is that killing all of these enemies is harder than some of the bosses in this game. And mind you, I was using a big sword go big bird build. I could reliably kill these enemies in 2 or 3 hits. Imagine trying to kill them with a dex build or having to use all of your spells to whittle them down. That would be horrible. I don't even understand how mage builds can get past this area because guess what? There is a boss. So you managed to run this gauntlet, or you took as much time as possible to just kill each enemy one by one. And what is your reward for doing all that? You get to fight possibly the worst boss in this game. The Ancient Dragon is the perfect example of how not to make a boss. It has 4 attacks, and all of them one-hit kill you unless you respec your stats to have as much HP as possible and as much fire resistance as possible. So your average build that has at least 40 points in vigor is screwed. He just can't live 1 hit. There is no margin of error in this boss. If you mistime your run, you die. Mismanage your stamina, die. Don't pay perfect attention to the boss's sound cues, you die.
Let's go gambling! Aw, dang it. Aw, dang it. Aw, dang it. Aw, dang it. Aw, dang it.
And when you do die, you have to do that whole gauntlet again. But I hear Dark Souls 2 Glazer responding to me. Just kill the enemies enough time to despawn them. I get that Dark Souls 2 requires the most patience out of all of these FromSoft games, but there is a limit to how patient I'm expected to be. I get not wildly mashing R1 to beat a boss. I get trying to find good windows to heal and not just getting greedy with them, but the amount of time it takes to despawn these enemies would take too long. I'm talking at least an hour of optimal play to take them all down one by one, and no one wants to play this game like that. Look, I get why some people like the slower way Dark Souls 2 feels, but this isn't a skill issue on my part. I tried different builds, I tried different approaches to the enemies in different ways, but this area is fundamentally flawed to the point where it made me not want to play Dark Souls 2 anymore. I played over 10 hours on this character, so I gave Dark Souls 2 more than a fair chance. I primarily fought enemies locked off, I used the life gems. The first stat that I started leveling up was adaptability, so I made sure my dodge roll was at least decent. I gave this game a fair chance. I played this game by its rules, but it doesn't even know what its rules are sometimes. People can enjoy Dark Souls 2 all that they want. Go ahead, like the game. But if they are not at least willing to admit, to agree with me, that it is the black sheep of the FromSoft library,
please get the fudge out.
Don't make me laugh. Just because someone joins the police doesn't make them some kind of agent of justice. You know why I applied? So I could legally carry a gun. That's all.
Shadow the Hedgehog is an anomaly. There is no other game like it in the entire Sonic franchise, and we see this before we even start the game. Or rather, we hear the difference. Most Sonic games have a theme song, and they typically sound upbeat and lively. Add in a few lyrics about friendship, living and learning, and evading the law, and boom, you got a banger OST. But Shadow's song is the exact opposite of all that. It's angsty, edgy, and I love it. What I don't love though is how the game feels. Shadow feels clunky and sluggish to me. It's like he's walking through, molasses. And along with that, the homing attack will occasionally fail to log onto an enemy and you'll yeet yourself off a cliff. Now obviously you're meant to gun go up and pop a cap in some black alien asses, but you're not always going to have a gun to kill enemies in that way. Look, I don't want to go into crazy autistic depth about why Shadow the Hedgehog is the black sheep of the Sonic franchise. You can already tell why it's completely different in tone and all that.
Where's that 4th Chaos Emerald?
But you know what? I've got a really great hot take. This hot take is so controversial that I may have to give off my autistic status. Are you ready? Sonic the Hedgehog sucks.
That was really bad.
Yeah, I said it, come at me. Shadow isn't a black sheep because it's clunky and has a tone that jumps all over the place. That's just Sonic games in general. There are more bad Sonic games than there are good. Whenever a Mario game is announced, we think, yay, I'm gonna stomp on some Goombas and say so long, gay Bowser. But when a Sonic game is announced, we pray to God it's not gonna be another Sonic Boom or Sonic 06. The default expectation for Sonic games is for them to be bad or just 5 out of 10 okay experiences. So when Sonic Frontiers is actually just alright, it's seen as a monumental success. Insert a "we are so back" right here. But it is rarer for a Sonic game to be good overall. But Chaz, you might say. The Sonic gameplay in Adventure 1 is good. Yeah, and then you have 5 other characters to play, and they're either Diet Sonic or Catching Froggy. You cannot cherry pick the few good aspects of a game and then say the entire experience is good. Imagine if I said Persona games are amazing, 10 out of 10 experiences, but only when you're doing the social sim parts of the game. Yeah, the moment you go into any palace or dungeon and have to fight shadows, oh, it just falls off a cliff. But we can just ignore that. You don't need to play that. Just do the social aspect. Just talk to the waifus, get a girlfriend, and boom, it's a 10 out of 10 game. If I tried to legitimately use that as an argument, people would say I'm insane and I don't know what I'm talking about. I'd look like an asshole. But that is the exact mentality people have with Sonic games. Froggy exists, the DX port of Adventure 1 exists, and they suck. Well, what about the good Sonic games? You know, all 3 of them? I'd go so far as to say that every Sonic game that is good has a "but" asterisk when you talk about them. Sonic 1, 2, and 3 are all great, they're timeless classics, but those 3 games are what, damn near 30 years old at this point? Sonic Unleashed has amazing cinematic moments, and it is as fast-paced as a Sonic game can be, but then you have to play as the Werehog. Another quick little thing I wanted to add is that every single Sonic game, after about 5 years, people start saying, oh, it was actually good and just underrated. It wasn't given a proper shot. I even saw that with Sonic Lost World. Someone was trying to say, oh wow, the parkour gameplay is actually good. You know, when I actually want to try it out and blah blah blah. Every Sonic game does that. Sonic Unleashed, Shadow the Hedgehog, literally every single Sonic game, 5 or 6 or however long after it comes out, someone is trying to say, oh, it's actually good, you're just too stupid to understand why it's good. And let me ask this. Every Sonic game, either it's an underrated gem or they are all mediocre like they came out as. Which is it? Is every Sonic game secretly underrated as hell, or are they properly rated as mediocre 5 out of 10 games? I noticed something. The Sonic franchise is a mirror to how the Sonic games play. They start off really good. Most Sonic games start off amazing with a fantastic stage, but then they slow down a bit in quality, have a nosedive with a horrible stage or a horrible game, then occasionally, you know, they bring themselves back up a bit with a better final level or something, and then you finish the game asking, well, was it a waste of time? Almost every Sonic game that has come out in the past 20 years has been glitchy, subpar, and a mess. Most Sonic games rely on gimmicks to have any kind of variety, and those gimmicks range from harmless to outright game-breaking. Sonic Forces has the Wisps, and they trivialize any stage you can use them on. 06 has those gems, and I don't need to say more about 06, and Sonic Superstars, which is a very recent game, has the wheels of power-ups that can break boss fights with no effort required.
Yo! Did I just like break the fucking game? There's no way.
If Sonic the Hedgehog was any other franchise, it would have died well over a decade ago. If Sonic Forces was just Furry Save the World and it was made by a AA studio, it would have forced them to shut down. The only reason it has survived for this long is because it's Sonic the Hedgehog. The series is entirely carried by the IP's main character, off aesthetic and personality alone. It's almost as if people will Sonic the Hedgehog into existence just because they want him to exist. Forgive me for sounding like a Persona boss talking about how we manifest reality to be whatever we want it to be, but that's the case! People remember Sonic the Hedgehog for his personality and gotta go fast. Do you genuinely remember the game's start to finish? You remember Green Hill Zone, you remember City Escape, but do you remember all the shit after that? Look, I'm just as autistic as the rest of the Sonic fandom. I eat my fair share of glue, sniff people's hair in public, and ride the short bus like everybody else. I really wanted to like Sonic games. Ever since I was a child, I've been playing them, like the whole Sonic Dreams collection or whatever it's called. But I can't remember the last time I played a Sonic game and enjoyed it from start to finish, let alone beat a Sonic game. Keep in mind, it took 15 years for a Sonic game to outsell Sonic Heroes. When I said Sonic the Hedgehog sucks, yeah, it's a hyperbolic kind of bait. I'm just trying to get people to type in the comments, "You're wrong, Chaz, you just don't know what you're talking about, blah blah blah." At the end of the day, Sonic games are just fine. Okay, good, 6 out of 10 games at best. Look at the games objectively. Forget the TV shows, forget the movies, forget the memes. And you'll see I'm right. This started off as me talking about how Shadow is the black sheep of the franchise, but you know what? I'm gonna go even higher. Sonic the Hedgehog is the black sheep of the entire video game industry. No other franchise has survived for as long as it has with as many mediocre or outright horrible games. Feel free to tell me how I'm wrong. Please tell me why one level in a game that came out 20 years ago invalidates my opinion. DMC Devil May Cry is a case study on how not to reboot a franchise. Let me start off by saying the game is super fun to play. My original plan was to just play maybe an hour of the game to get the footage for it, but I ended up playing well over 2 hours. It's a lot of fun. It's odd how the guns are relegated to just a button instead of the triggers, but after you unlock the scythe and the axe, it starts to feel a lot better. Trying to switch between your weapons mid-combo, using your guns to interrupt enemies, and pulling those flying little shits to you is so much fun. It really is great. But the game fails with everything else, and I can prove this with one line.
Not in a million years.
Take notes, people. If you are trying to reboot a series, the last thing you want to do is piss off the fans of the previous games. This Dante is telling the player how cool and badass he is by ripping on the old design, but all that does is annoy the player and piss off die-hard fans of the original games. Don't tell me he's cool, show me, but all I'm shown is an angsty emo teenager who's trying too hard not to care. Even beyond the main character, the music, the UI, and the atmosphere is forgettable or outright annoying. The OST is trying too hard to sound like a grungy garage band, and I'm not into it. Now, trust me, I love me some anal cunt, but that's not a video game OST kind of song, right? Another thing that I'm not into is how the game will just jarringly stop at the end of a combat section, but that's just me nitpicking at this point. There's a reason this is the only game in the DMC universe. They abandoned this version of Dante, and for good reason. Truth be told, I think I'm gonna cut this little segment short. I thought of a really funny way to make a standalone DMC video, so I'm gonna work on that after I'm done with this video. Let's just view this little segment as a way to catch our breath, you know, to calm down before I get to the very last game. So if you want to see a full standalone video talking more about DMC Devil May Cry, please leave me a comment about how I'm wrong about my Dark Souls 2 and Sonic the Hedgehog takes. Thank you. Okay, let me set the scene. It's Saturday, and you've been let out of your wagey cagey for the weekend. You're based and emulator pilled and feel like playing a Pokemon game and not spending $200 for the physical cartridge. You have Gens 1 through 5 to pick from, and 99% of the time, you are not going to be picking Generation 2. Let me make it crystal clear, pun entirely intended, Generation 2 is by no means horrible. Gold, Silver, and Crystal are decent Pokemon games, but they have fundamental flaws that make them just not worth playing nowadays with all the other Pokemon games we have available. Let's get the most brought up point out of the way, the horrible level curves in the game. Generation 1's gym leaders had reasonable levels for their teams, but Generation 2's leaders are just so bad. Oh no, I have to beat Chuck and his 2 level 30 Pokemon, whatever shall I do? Oh, you better watch out for Price and his Dugong, it'll absolutely wreck your shit. So yeah, you get that point. The difficulty in this game is all over the place, but for the majority of the game, it will be easy to steamroll your way through everyone. Another big flaw with the game is that there are so many new Pokemon that have horrible spawn rates, or you can't even get them until after you beat the Elite Four. And for a few Pokemon like Larvitar and Misdreavus, you can only get them before the final fight in the entire game. That is so stupid. Why are there so many new Johto Pokemon that can only be found in Kanto? Like, it's horrible. So most Generation 2 playthroughs end up looking exactly the same when it comes to the teams you use. I know the Sinnoh games have a similar issue, but it's even worse here. You get your starter, the Red Gyarados, the Eevee you receive from Bill, and then you evolve it into, a Jolteon, Espeon, or Umbreon, a Pokemon that learns Fly, another HM Slave for moves like Cut, maybe you caught one of the Electrodes in the Rocket Hideout, and then you add whatever legendary you want before the lead. I know not every person will run a team like this, but in all honesty, most of the Pokemon available to you in Johto, they kinda suck. Oh boy, I can't wait to use another Sentret. Yo, this Skiploom and Jumpluff, they look pretty fucking hardcore. By the time you reach a new area like the Ice Path, you've already invested most of the experience into one or two of your Pokemon, so there's no real point in catching a level 20 Swinub or Jinx when the trainers are starting to be in their 40s. It would just be a waste of time to try to level that Pokemon up, at least to me. That's the conclusion I came to. I did a start to finish playthrough specifically for this video, and eventually I realized that only using my starter was the way to go. Feraligatr has enough move pool coverage to just beat anyone it comes across. Now, some people might respond to this with, if I have a problem with the difficulty, then just do a hardcore Nuzlocke. And yeah, doing a Nuzlocke is a fun way to play Pokemon, but one, not every player enjoys doing Nuzlocks, and two, it still doesn't change the fact that most of the gym battles are still going to be piss easy because they only have 2 or 3 bad Pokemon with even worse movesets. Also, if you want to do a Nuzlocke, if you wake up in the morning with the intent of thinking I'm gonna do a Nuzlocke, you could just do one in any other game. Why specifically choose Generation 2? Why would you do a Pokemon Crystal playthrough when the Gen 4 versions exist or Black 2 and White 2 exist? What I'm getting at is that trying to add half a dozen self-imposed rules still doesn't fix the major problems with the game. I know that because I did a hardcore Nuzlocke in Pokemon Heart Gold, and most of the gym battles were still fairly easy. Check it out when you're done with this video, by the way. Another poorly executed part of the game is Team Rocket. They just suck from start to finish, and that even applies to the Gen 4 remakes. Like, what is their end goal? Take over the radio tower and contact Giovanni? That's it? It is so underwhelming and tedious. Literally, no one cares about the Rocket plotline, and ends up making an already slower Pokemon game feel even more sluggish. Look, I can admit, you know what? I'm being pretty negative right now. So let's pull it back. Let's, stop being a little negative Nancy and look at some of the good things. Hey, you know what? The sprite work, phenomenal, immaculate. The animations look amazing for the Game Boy. Adding in items and splitting the special stat into special attack and defense is fantastic, legitimately perfect, genius ideas. But literally every other Pokemon game past it has items and the split, and then the 3 generations after it have even better sprite work, right? So what does Gen 2 have that sets it apart from the other games? Alright, it's about time for me to move on to my main point against Generation 2, and I might get some hate for this. Generation 2 by itself is not necessarily the black sheep in the Pokemon series. Games like Brilliant Diamond aren't looked on too fondly, they're probably considered worse than Gen 2. But rather, the region itself is the black sheep. Every other Pokemon region can exist inside its own bubble. Unova, Sinnoh, Kalos, and even Kanto can exist by themselves, but Johto just can't. Johto's identity is directly linked to its neighboring region, and that means half of the game's content isn't focused on the primary region. Splitting the game in two like this hurts both regions. Kanto was unable to be fleshed out like it needed to be, so the second half of the game can easily be blown through. There's no challenge to it, but because they included Kanto, Johto wasn't given the proper fine-tuning it needed. So both halves of the game feel half-baked. The game only gets a little bit more difficult with the last two battles against Blue and Red, so you're left with a post-game that feels way too easy and lifeless. Oh no! Oh please, Janine, don't send out your level 39 Venomoth, please! It's definitely gonna outspeed and one-hit KO my level 60 for Alligator. Oh no! Whatever shall I do? Seeing how Kanto has changed is cool, but a little extra world building can only carry the game so much. Seeing Cinnabar Island be reduced to rubble is fantastic, but the fight with Blaine still sucks ass. Johto still has fundamental issues that just can't be changed without changing the entire region. If they tried to make a glittering gold and shimmering silver remake for the Switch 2, they have to include Kanto. They just have to. If you thought people were upset at the Battle Frontier being removed in Oraz, well, imagine the riots we would see if Kanto was removed from the game. But maybe we could see a Legends game that touches on when the Burn Tower wasn't struck by lightning, right? That could be cool, and that the two regions are truly separated by the mountain. But even if they did that, people would still expect to be able to visit Kanto. So it's a pick your poison kind of situation. Either remove Kanto and upset people because they expect it to be there, or keep it in and leave the regions half-baked, because developing two whole Pokemon regions side by side at the same time, it's just such a monumental task. What we have right now is a generation with a lot of good ideas that were not executed well at all. And look, play a ROM hack. I get that that's an argument you can make. Hey, there are a lot of people that have updated Pokemon Crystal and made it quote-unquote better, but I'm talking about the game that was released that people paid for. And sadly, the game has not aged well at all. The final battle with Red can only carry the game so much. So there you have it. There are just a few examples of black sheeps in some video game franchises that I know of. By all means, they aren't god-awful games for the most part, but because they're in a series with games that are genuinely better than them, they stick out like sore thumbs. You know, these games, they've got some good, some bad, but overall, they have enough bad things inside of them to be looked on with a hint of negativity at the least. Are there any games you think of that could be put on this list? What games do you think are black sheeps and franchises that I didn't bring up? Are you still mad that I said Sonic sucks? Are you still coping and seething that your nostalgia blinds you to the fact that Generation 2 just isn't that good anymore? Please let me know in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next video.
Gang! It's your boy Adachi! Just wanted to say thank you to all the people who are members on this based YouTube channel. Always remember, gun, go!